This is Between the Lines. Today, we dissect the road less traveled.
Hello, this is Caro from Uruguay, and if you have just watched the previous chapter, it was a really short one. So we are now in this episode called Who's to Blame, because we are going to talk about the sixth chapter, Neurosis and Character Disorders, which is inside the same section of discipline from the book The Road Less Traveled. And this is quite a long one in the book, but I try to condense some things and like make a table or some ideas taken from these two ways of seeing the world, we could say. And I want to tell you that Dr. Peck doesn't beat around the bush. He's really blunt with his words and descriptions he does about the cases, and he really says you have to do this, or you can have a mental disease. So it's really upfront and really frank and sincere, his declarations or his description in the book. And I really like that, because he's not trying to make it easier for you, because you have to, if you want to grow, if you want to be a mature adult, you have to go through this kind of pain, right? He's not disrespectful at all, but he's kind of quite frank and upfront. So, in this chapter, Neurosis and Character Disorders, he talks about these two like kind of opposite disorders that we have in our personalities or in our world. Again, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm a coach, but this is what I gathered from the book and what the doctor says. And these two disorders are related to responsibility. Remember that we talked about responsibility. If we want to solve problems, we have to first understand or acknowledge that we have a problem, and it is up to us or up to you to solve them. So again, these two disorders are disorders of responsibility, specifically about that. And we can talk about neurosis. He mixes everything in the chapter. He talks a little bit of neurosis, he talks a little bit of character disorder in each paragraph, and he goes comparing one another. But I took like the main things so we don't spend a long time in this discussion. So he talks about neurosis, and neurosis is like, and I will go just to the bone and say the behaviors mostly. So we will talk about this these two disorders, right? And it's not that you are only one or the other. You are mostly one than the other, but in certain occasions and certain topics and certain activities or things, you may be one or the other. But in general, we are mostly one or mostly the other. So neurotic people, what they do is they take too much responsibility. Remember, we said that these are responsibility disorders. And they think they are the one to blame for everything. If something goes wrong, they are the ones with the responsibility. They are the ones that feel that they are inferior because they have a failure, or the language they use. For example, I have also taken notes of that, is I should, I have to, I ought to do something, I must do this. And so they are always trying to be for the others too much, maybe because they are too empathetic and they are too kind and they are too it's like taking too much responsibility for the things that are happening in the world, or the problems that they have or they see around them. And one of the phrases, for example, they tend to use is, something is wrong with me because I don't fit in this world. I feel like I'm from I don't belong here, those kind of things. Which is, if you remember, we talked about the chapter, the previous chapter, which was just responsibility, the Okinawa cases. In this case, the neurotic personality could be related to the woman, the lonely woman that I mentioned just briefly the other day, in the other episode. And this woman was blaming herself for not being able to have friends in Okinawa because she was the wife of a military colonel something or general, and she was alone all the time. She wanted to have friends. She went to parties with the other wives, but she didn't feel like she was not fit for the group. And after some time, she realized that she was really not a fit because she was even more ambitious than these other wives. She wanted to study, she wanted to do more interesting things, or she considered more interesting things than the wives in the community. And so she was blaming herself for being lonely. And after some time with the treatment, she could solve that and she could like balance her state. But now going into character disorders, this was the case of well, I will go back to the case later. But this character disorder, what they do is they take absolutely no responsibility for the things that go on in their lives or around them. They say, no, I'm not to blame. I have nothing to do with this. It's because of the government. It's because of, I don't know, my parents, or it's because everyone else has their fault except for them. And so they think that they are out of control. They can control things around them. So they have absolutely no power, no choice. They can do anything. They are the ones saying, it's beyond me. Remember that we talked about that. So the doctor says that they are impossible to treat in psychotherapy because they don't take responsibility, so they cannot grow. It's like the lost cases, we could say. And the worst part is that they make everyone miserable around them because they think everyone else is to blame, and they are the worst role models for their children because they bring up children that are also irresponsible or maybe neurotic, so they make them miserable. And he also says that, and I found that is why I say doctor is really frank and upfront and blunt. He said these people are destructive and ineffective. So yes, you have seen, I'm sure, this kind of people also some places. Maybe they have specific disorders, but they are disorders of character, and they also tend to bring this attitude everywhere they go. That is why they make everyone miserable. And it comes to mind several people that I have known in the past, that everything they do is never their fault. They don't have choices. They just do what they want, and other people's fault the results. So the language they use is I can't, I couldn't, I had to do this because this was the only thing I could do. Those kind of things, like having a choice, like it's not my fault, it's never their fault, right? And the example that the doctor said, which was in the previous chapter in responsibility, there was also another Okinawa's military person, and he was a general. So the doctor was treating him and was starting to treat him, and he had a drinking problem. That is why his superior actually sent him to for treatment. So this person, he said, there's nothing I can do here in Okinawa. This place is just for drinking. And that was his justification for drinking. So the doctor said, but don't you like, for example, reading? And he said, yes, I like reading. And why don't you go to the library instead of going to the bar? And he said, no, but I don't know if I like reading that much. Okay, if you don't like reading, why don't you go fishing, for example? No, at night I can fish, but there are many groups of men that go fishing and they like it. No, but I don't know if I like that. And everything the doctor was trying to help them realize that he could do instead of drinking, he just didn't want to. So he always blamed that the island, the Okinawa, was horrible, and that was his main thing or his main reason for drinking, which actually wasn't, because there were so many people there that weren't drinking, right? But so the doctor sadly had to say to his superior, which was following the case, he said he has a character disorder and he will never change because he doesn't see the responsibility he has in his own behavior. So finally, this person was even dismissed, I think, or retired from the force. But yeah, the doctor says that these people with character disorder are impossible to treat. And I don't know, this is like 50 years ago. Maybe now there's some kind of treatment. I don't know. But what I've heard from something that is quite similar is really talked a lot about right now, which is narcissism. They say it cannot be cured, so maybe it's kind of something like it. So these people never grow, basically, right? And even though we have a mixed of thing, it's not that we are completely neurotic or completely have character disorder. He says that in therapy, people who are mostly neurotic can also treat their character disorder once you have helped them and you have connected with them, firstly in their neurotic part, and then they can start seeing how they behave with a character disorder in other areas of their lives. So they are possible to treat. And because neurotic people always blame themselves, so they are easy to treat, right? Because they take too much responsibility. So the thing to do there is just to balance the responsibility that they have, not take too much. So this chapter is really interesting because we can understand if we take responsibility, if we really, even though we don't think that we have some kind of responsibility in some things. I know sometimes I say, this is not my fault, but try to see the way that you can change something in the situation. That's really helpful for growth and for being a mature adult, right? Remember that the doctor said that if you have character disorders, you are completely ineffective and destructive. So I hope you are a neurotic that blames yourself. That's even better for therapy, as he says. And because as you are blaming yourself or trying to understand why this happens, sometimes maybe too much. I know I'm mostly neurotic in these kind of things. But in the long run, after we understand and take this, can separate really who's to blame. If I'm to blame in this problem, I don't know, an 80%, 20%. It's not completely my fault, but I can do something maybe to solve this, or maybe I can do anything because I am working with a person who has a character disorder and I won't be able to help them because I don't take any responsibility, and maybe they have the 80% of the responsibility, or I don't know, you get that, right? And so by understanding that, is when you grow and when you can do something and start taking layers. Like an onion, I always said you can start taking layers after layers, and it is a continuous growth thing. So that is something interesting that the doctor says. It's not that I am neurotic and that's it. And no, I will always have to be working on that kind of thing, right? And it's part of life, assessing, reassessing, continue assessing, continue reassessing. It's like a continuous growth. So yeah, that's the most I could take from it, and I tried to condense it so it's not that long, this chapter, but in the book's several pages, it's quite long. It has a lot of examples and things that the doctor says, but that is why I tried to take some things like this. And so if you like this chapter, please share with people that you think that maybe can be benefited from this chapter, this whole book. And if you want, you can also contribute by buying me a coffee if you want. That is super appreciated. And you can find everything down below in the description. So have fun and see you in the next episode. Bye bye.
Stay tuned for Ulua's next episode.